Hello and welcome to another one of my videos. In this video, if you haven't already guessed, I'm going to be talking about rear shock absorbers for my CX500 project. Now, the ones that I'm using at the moment on the bike are the stock ones. However, they're rusty, they're leaking, and I can bet you they perform as good as they look, aka crap. So I thought, right, I'm going to have to get some aftermarket ones to put on. Now, there's a few companies out there that do aftermarket shock absorbers for older bikes. Hagon are a good company, and there's a few others. However, I really set my heart on getting some separate reservoir shocks, or remote reservoir shocks I should say, for the bike, just because they look good and they basically refine the performance of the shock. Basically you've got a bladder in the bottom of this cylinder here, which is filled with nitrogen, and there's oil on the other side. Now, after looking, I could have either gone right up to the extreme limit of Öhlins, which are basically expensive, or I could have gone right down to the cheapy scale, which are cheap Chinese rip-off shocks from Öhlins, which are RFYs, if I recall, for 60 quid. Looked around through the forums and they said, unless you build the RFY shocks to a good standard, as in film with oil, charge them right, they're crap. So, with that in mind, I looked around a few forums and I found these. Now, these are remote reservoir tech alloy shock absorbers. These cost me 120 quid. Now, for the price, what you get is, you get obviously a remote reservoir shock absorber, which has pre-load adjustment and also a damping adjustment, which, to be honest, is great. The idea behind getting the damping adjustment and the preload adjustment, most shocks come with preload anyway, but the damping, is my bike is going to be a hell of a lot lighter than the stock version. Hopefully it's going to be around about 200 kilos instead of 240. So that means, I thought, if I get that with the damping adjustment and the preload, I'll be able to adjust the bike to its weight and also to my riding style. However, some of you are now shouting out there going, that's too much to pay. Don't know why, but you might be. Well, I've got good news. You can actually get the lower model of this with the remote reservoir, just without the actual damping adjustment, for £89. Now, you can't really go wrong for £89. So, what do you get for your money? Well, first off, you get an aluminium bodied shock absorber with a remote reservoir here. As we can see, we have a fill point there for the nitrogen if you ever want to adjust that. I think that's a different thread from the normal standard one which is used, so that might be something to look out for. You get a preload adjustment there, and you also get a little tool, which is a little C-spanner to adjust that. You then get the dampen adjustment at the bottom here, which is not on the cheaper versions, but it is on, if you pay an extra 30 quid, you get that. And you also get a variable rate spring on it as well, which is quite good. So basically, depending on how hard you actually ride, it basically adjusts the spring rate depending on which one of the coils is actually being compressed. I might have explained that very wrong, but I guess you get me gist. So yeah, and also you get these little spacers here. Now these go at the bottom here to actually adjust the distance between the two eyes here. So basically, if you've got a bike which needs more distance between the two eyes, you can just add one of these on and you get that adjustment, which is quite good. You also get quite a lot of washers. Now, I will not be using this many washers in the install, but it is good to know that you've got some spare washers there if you need them. So hopefully in the next few days I'll be fitting these to the bike and seeing how they look, and I can tell you now, I'm going to say they're going to look quite badass. Just because, yeah. Another thing that struck me as soon as I lifted one of these shocks was how light they are. Now, the stock ones are heavy, and I mean heavy, even though they've lost most of their oil, they're heavy. These ones are light as a feather, so this is just going to add to the weight reduction of the bike, which is always a good thing, because the CX500s, when they were new and stock, were heavy beasts. They were good, but they were heavy. My aim with this bike is to actually get the weight as low as possible. That's the whole idea of calf races. And this will then give you a higher power to weight ratio. So it's basically just like adding more horsepower to the bike without actually tinkering with the engine too much, because the engines, you can't really get that much power out of them from stock, unless you go Honda's route and turbocharge them, but I'm not going to go down that route at all. So yeah, so with further ado, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to go and have myself a cup of tea, because I think I deserve it. And in my next video, I'm going to fit them and see how they look on the bike. So with that, I shall see you soon, and as always, keep safe.